If I ask you the question, what is the biggest predictor of success in life? A lot of you would say IQ. And that's certainly a factor, certainly a part of it. But they've done studies and they've done research and they've found that, yes, you need a certain level of IQ, obviously, to make it in life. But there's another factor that's involved. And this is by research from Ivy League schools, from military academies, and from the National Spelling Bee. And what they found is it's a factor called grit. Grit and resilience are two of the factors that they found are a greater predictor of success. Now, I know IQ is there, but how many of you, no show of hands, know somebody who is really smart and they're still a doofus? And so they're finding that being really smart does not necessarily make you successful. But grit and resilience is something that really does play into this and something that helps you. Now, when I say grit, I mean the ability to continue to push through despite difficulties or delay. Delay in something that's maybe it's a long-term goal. And then resilience is very much related to grit. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, bounce out of difficulty. Now, the reason we're sharing those this morning is because the story that we're about to share, the movie we're about to share, is a documentary called The Dawn Wall. And it's a story of a young man by the name of Tommy Caldwell. And Tommy Caldwell is a mountain climber, not just any kind of mountain climber. He's what they call a free climber. Now, a free climber uses equipment only to catch him if he falls. In other words, he only pulls himself up by his hands and feet and only uses ropes to catch him if he falls. Free climbing. It's extremely difficult, and this story takes place in Yosemite as he's climbing El Capitan. And so you're going to see in this clip, this is a massive undertaking because they said it was impossible to do. So let's watch the clip from The Dawn Wall.
Hello?
Hey guys, it's John Branch from the New York Times. How's it going up there?
Good, John.
How high up are you guys right now?
We are about 1,200 feet up the wall at our base camp. This has been our home for 9 days now.
Tommy, I guess the bottom line question here, why are you doing this? What's the point of all this for you?
Inch by nerve-wracking inch, using only their fingertips to grasp razor-sharp edges,
Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen attempt the hardest climb in the world.
No one has ever free climbed the Dawn Wall.
3,000 feet of straight-up granite.
As a kid, Tommy was slow at everything. He had a lot of difficulty in school. The teachers actually at one point told us that he was mentally retarded and would never learn.
I was like developmentally delayed through probably still, honestly. I was this very fragile little kid, incredibly shy. But meanwhile, my dad was like the symbol of a man. He's like this big bodybuilder dude and mountain climber, larger than life.
Tommy was small. He was way behind, didn't crawl until he was over 2.
I think my dad felt the best way to prepare this fragile little kid for the world was to toughen him up a little bit. And so he took me on all these adventures.
3 years old, strap on the skis.
Camping in a snow cave during the blizzard. Every summer, we'd go to Yosemite with my family, and my dad would take me climbing on these giant walls. Some of the craziest climbing stunts you could ever do, and he did it with a 6-year-old.
The things that Tommy's dad took him on, today you would have Child Protective Services coming after you. He basically took hardship and rephrased it as growth.
He was loving, but he definitely let me suffer.
The word that was in my mind was resilience. Seems to me one of the best gifts you can give your kid is an ability to deal with adversity.
So next week, if Joy and I are not here, it's because we're climbing that. Actually, I'm watching her climb it, and we're going to. That's an amazing. Now listen, you saw that mountain that he had to climb, but that's not the only mountain that Tommy Caldwell had to overcome. He had some difficult things. One, he had the label of being slow. Being labeled as slow is something that creates some real barriers in life. And if you're always labeled slow, people don't expect much out of you. And if you're not careful, you can have low expectations as well. He went through a very traumatic experience. Tommy, when he was a teenager, he and his girlfriend Beth and 2 other climbers were invited to climb and do a documentary in Kyrgyzstan, one of the stands over there. They were over there. And they were actually kidnapped by a group of terrorists. And the terrorists began to trek them through the mountains. They were going through the mountains for days. Some of the terrorists left, and they had one terrorist who continued to keep them captive. And they realized, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. We could die out here in the mountains. And Tommy actually pushed the guy off a cliff and killed him. And it created a huge problem for him. When he came back, he said that he and Beth, he said they were just searching. They were so traumatized by this. He said, we even went to church, which, like, thanks, Tommy, but you could tell he was hurting, and he was looking for answers. And boy, if you go to the right church, that's a great place to go. So he was looking for that. He also experienced something that it really could have just absolutely derailed his whole climbing. He married this little girl, Beth, and they're living up in the mountains. And he was cutting some wood with a table saw and cut off his index finger right to the top knuckle. I mean, the middle knuckle. And evidently the index finger is the finger that mountain climbers use. And so the doctor told him he would never climb again. The climbing world wrote him off when they heard he was a superstar in the mountain climbing world. They wrote him off. They said he's done. But he was able to overcome that, and he actually was on this adventure with half a finger. And then the last one, maybe the most difficult one for Tommy Caldwell, was Beth, the little girl that he married. When they had been married for a while, he noticed she was growing more distant. She actually fell in love with somebody else and left Tommy and married the other guy. And Tommy said that was the most devastating pain. In fact, to the point where Tommy said he went to El Capitan and he thought about climbing it free solo. Now, free solo means no ropes, no partners. And he said, if I die, then maybe the pain will stop. So, a lot of difficulties. And you say, well, I'm not a mountain climber. Yeah, you're not a mountain climber, neither am I. But all of us have challenges we've got to come over. All of us deal with things. And this next clip, I want to show you what happened with Tommy. And you want to pay attention to the very first part of this clip because it shows you how he actually climbs.
It's really unnerving. You're just waiting to slip off at any moment.
After 19 days, Tommy Caldwell pulling himself over the edge of the Don Wall. Followed minutes later by climbing partner Kevin Jorgensen.
The crowd cheered as the 2 men accomplished a feat many said was impossible.
Okay, am I the only one that was weirded out when they're standing on that cliff and it's like 3,000? Like, oh man. Isn't that amazing how they climb like that? Just up against the wall, but the resilience that it took to get through that. See, Tommy had all those obstacles, but resilience and grit was a bigger part of his life. And what happens is, again, you say, I'm not climbing mountains. Yeah, but you've got difficulties. All of us have challenges and things that we have to get through and overcome, and we're going to need some of that resilience. But here's some of the things that we see in Tommy that you saw in him that it really gives us a picture of how resilience forms. One thing it does is resilience has a growth mindset. If you're gritty, you have a growth mindset. A growth mindset says this: I don't think that life is just win or lose. I think I can get better. And so not everything is a win-lose. It's I will continue to improve. I will continue to grow. That's a growth mindset. We can apply it in any area. Listen, don't look at your marriage as a win-lose deal. Look at it as, hey, we can always get better. We can get better at parenting. We can get better at our relationship with the Lord. We can always grow. It's a great thing. It's a growth mindset. The second thing that you see in Tommy was he viewed adversity as a challenge, not as a threat. That's a powerful thought. If you see adversity, difficulty as a challenge, not as a threat. When you see it as a threat, it tends to cause fear. And fear it can paralyze you, it can motivate you too. It can do both, but it's a bad motivator. Man was coming home from a bar, spent a little too much time in the bar, and so he thought he would walk home instead of drive. Took a shortcut through a graveyard, and right through the shortcut, they just dug a brand new grave. He falls in it. He was obviously not a mountain climber because he couldn't get out. And he was drunk, but he kept trying to jump out, and it was slippery, and he couldn't do it. So finally, he just thought, they'll find me in the morning. And he curled up in a ball in the corner and went to sleep. About 30 minutes later, one of his buddies took the same shortcut, fell in the exact same grave. Didn't see the guy in the corner, and he's jumping and trying to get out and trying to get out. And the guy in the corner woke up, and he reached over there and grabbed his ankle and said, "It's no use. You'll never get out." But he did. Fear can be a motivator, and it can move you and get you going, but it's a poor motivator because over time it really takes a toll on you. Then the third thing and they don't show you this in the movie, but Tommy and his partner Kevin had a great support team made up mostly of mountain climbers who brought supplies. They would either rappel down or they would climb up with ropes, and they brought them supplies. They stayed on that mountain for 19 days. And so you see with Tommy, you're staying out there, you have a team of people that are supporting you. And even though they didn't show it in the movie, he had a whole support team. And so they have found that if you want to be gritty and more resilient, you need to hang out with gritty, resilient people. This is what I love about church. If you want to get stronger in your faith, you need to hang out with people that have some faith and believe God and trust God. And speaking of gritty people, I want to give a shout out to one of the grittiest groups we have here in the Ark, and that's our parking lot and cart drivers on a day like today. Give them a hand clap. That's a gritty man, because there's some difficulties out there. So when y'all leave today, be nice. No one-fingered waves. Nice to them. So the last one was this. They have found that people who are grittier, people who are more resilient, are people who can laugh. And you see with Tommy, he had an attitude that says, I can laugh. And that I can face adversity and face it with a smile. And actually they found that laughter is a great buffer for stress and problems. Now, that's amazing that researchers are finding this out. The Bible's known this all the time. Proverbs 17, a merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. Man, if you're able to laugh at things, that's so much a better place to be. A number of years ago, I told a joke, and it was a joke about a couple having marital problems. Well, the next week, I get a letter from a lady, and boy, she was really she was telling me off. She read me the riot act. And I realized the joke was not crude and it was not off color. What it was about the joke is she was going through a difficult time with her marriage. And that joke hit to the place where she couldn't laugh. And I thought, I didn't write her back. I didn't try to explain it. I realized you got to get to the place where you can laugh. You've got to get to the place, and you know that you're getting better when you can start to look at your situation and laugh and begin to go, I don't know how, but somehow, by the grace of God, we're going to come through this situation. A merry heart does good like a medicine because it feeds on the inside. And so we see that with Tommy. By the way, to give you a little bit of the story, the lady he was kissing at the end, he met someone new, he married, they have 2 beautiful children. Listen, you have to be married to kiss a guy who hasn't had a shower in 19 days. But Tommy was able to overcome these things. In the Bible, it gives us some great pictures of resilience, and one of them is a lady. And she is a very gritty, resilient lady. Let's read her story here in Matthew 15. Then Jesus went out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and behold, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him, saying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed." But he answered her not a word. His disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away. She cries out after us." But he answered and said, "I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Then she came and worshiped him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered and said, "It's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs." And she said, "Yes, Lord. Yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered and said to her, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire." And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Talk about a gritty, resilient lady. This is the one. Now look, I say, how in the world was she so gritty and resilient? Well, she had to overcome some things, but here's the first thing. She had a big purpose. If you've ever had a child that goes through emotional problems or a child that's in real trouble, it's agonizing as a parent. If you have a loved one or a friend that's going through something difficult and they're really dealing with it emotionally. She said, "My daughter is severely demon-possessed." So her getting help for her daughter was a big purpose and a worthwhile pursuit. She had to overcome a label as well. See, both writers, Mark and Matthew, tell us this story, and both of them tell us that she make a point of telling us she was a Gentile, she was a Syrophoenician, she was from this section, and the people group that she came out of had no Jewish heritage, they had no covenant with God, they had no connection. In fact, they were a brutal culture, a very, very difficult pagan culture. And so it tells us she had that label. Now, they knew who she was, and maybe she's thinking to herself, she could have easily thought, well, there's no way that a Jewish guy is going to pay any attention to me. But yet she still came after Jesus. And she still came because she had a purpose that helped her push through. And then she did not allow discouragement to stop her. I mean, can you think about, she comes and she cries out to Jesus, kind of very courteous, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." She cries out, and Jesus didn't answer. He ignores her. And then, so Jesus ignores her, so she starts talking to the disciples. "Hey," and she's crying out after them. Evidently, she was loud because it bothered the disciples, and they're like, "Lord, do something with this lady because she's bothering us." And so the disciples, that's the second time. And then Jesus said, "I wasn't sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." That's the third time. And then she comes in and she worships him. She said, "Lord, helps me." And he says, "You know, it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs." "Oh, no, you didn't just call me a dog. Are you kidding? Don't you know that most of us would have gone home and blown up Facebook? I was at church and the preacher called me a dog." Man, that's difficult. But you know what? She had a big purpose. She was not discouraged. And she basically just kept on. She said, "Lord, even the little dogs get the crumbs that fall from the table." In other words, if the Lord calls you a dog, just go ahead and say, "Bow wow." But here's the deal. She didn't get offended so easily. She could have been offended and walked away without an answer. But she had a great faith that she believed that Jesus was her answer here. And Jesus said something about her he said about very few people. He said, "Woman, you have some great faith." And her daughter was healed from that hour. She could have walked away, but she persevered. Listen, guys, we need grit. We need perseverance. We need to be able to increase, I call it our GQ. You have IQ, intelligence quotient. You have EQ, emotional quotient. We need an increase in GQ, our gritty quotient. Listen, you need to be gritty because life can be, what's the word I'm thinking of? Difficult is the word I'm thinking of. It can be hard. So we need that grit quotient raised up. So how in the world do we get there? Well, there's some keys to that. We can see it from the lady. We can learn. Here's the first one. You need a bigger purpose. Bigger purpose equals bigger grit. Now, the Bible tells us that with Jesus. He was our greatest example of that. Look at this in Hebrews. "Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. It said Jesus was looking forward to the joy set before him. He knew what was going to happen. He knew that him going to the cross, him going to the grave, him being raised from the dead was going to provide salvation for billions of people. There was a joy set before him, and because he had a big purpose, he was able to endure something extremely difficult. You say, well, I'm not Jesus. Yeah, but all of us need a big purpose in life. A number of years ago, it's 25, 26 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with chronic acute pancreatitis. It was difficult. It looked like she might even pass away. She just lost her father a few months before. And Christina was about 6 years old, and Joy was lying on the sofa one day, and Christina came and sat, and she was real fidgety. And Joy said, what do you want, sweetheart? And Christina looked at her and said, Mommy, are you going to go to heaven like Papa? And Joy looked at her and she said, well, no, honey. She said, I believe in healing. And Christina said, okay, and she got up and ran off. And the Lord spoke to her heart and said, then you better fight. And Joy realized, she said, I did not want to leave 3 children. Michael was just born. She had Matthew, had Christina, and the children, plus the fact, she said, Alan, I had no idea what kind of woman you would drag in the door if I left. So there was Joy's big purpose right there. I need to stick around because Lord knows what he's going to come up with. I need to stay. But it was that big purpose. It was that was the joy set before her. I want to be there for my kids. And so it enabled her to push through. It enabled her to fight through. It gave her the purpose to handle difficulty and delay. When healing didn't come, she stayed with it. My wife, I'll be honest with you, is a very gritty lady. And she's all sweetheart, and she's a package, but boy, she's got some grit in her. The second thing that you find is we're dealing with grit. How do you increase the grit quotient? And it's a key thing. Most people, listen, you have to rebrand yourself spiritually. Most people that I talk with don't have a sense of really what God has done in them. They don't have a sense of how worthy they are. They carry around a sense of guilt or unworthiness. Or they don't understand the capacity of what God has done. You know, we quote a verse in here almost every week. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Well, that new creation is not weak and powerless. There's some capacity there. There's some horsepower there. And you're part of something. But if you don't understand that, if you don't know that, you'll think yourself out of a fight before you ever get there. One of the most clear examples of that was when I was 12 years old. I was a track runner. I ran in my home state of North Carolina. I went to a regional junior Olympic track meet in the 11 and 12 boys, and I cleaned up one day. It's in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was regional. I won 4 blue ribbons. It was the highlight. My entire sports career went downhill after that, but it was the highlight of my day. And 2 weeks later, I went to the state finals in Junior Olympics. And so I was ready, man. I was all psyched up. I was ready to go. I went out to the track, and there was a man holding a clipboard. I'll never forget. I said, sir, where's the boys' 11 and 1,200-yard dash heats? And he never looked up. He said, son, we don't have boys 11 and 12. We have boys 12 and 13. They're down there. I'm thinking, no way. Because there's a bunch of gorillas down there. I mean, these guys were huge. And I thought, 12 and 13. How many of you know sometimes there can be a huge difference between a 13-year-old boy and a 12-year-old boy? And I remember walking down there and my heart sank because there are all these guys that look like they've been shaving for the last 3 years. And I leaned over, and it's a memory that's etched in me. I leaned over and I looked, and they were just like hairy legs all lined up next to me. And I had 3 hairs. I'd counted them. I had 3 on this ankle. And then we started telling each other good luck. And they're all like, good luck, good luck, good luck. And I'm like, yeah, good luck. I was beat before they ever shot the gun. I was beat. And in fact, it was so bad, I ran my worst time. All the officials were on the track when I was finishing. I mean, they had walked out. They thought the whole race was over. And here I am, come chugging in behind. It was the worst I'd ever done. You know, they've done studies that say that your mind will give up before your body does. I was already beaten down, but I think spiritually speaking, if you're always looking at what you're not and all your failures and all this and all that, and looking at who you are, listen, you have to find out. This is one of the reasons I believe church is important, because we constantly remind you of who God says you are and what God says you can do. And when you begin to rebrand from that, then you're not what you used to be. You are what God says you are, and He says you can do it. You've got a lot more capacity than you thought. So you begin to rebrand yourself, and that makes a huge difference. So how do we continue to move there? Here's the third one. You have to buy into the idea of sowing and reaping. Sowing and reaping. So you plant a seed. When you plant a seed, you don't step back and wait for that seed just to sprout. You don't plant a seed and go clear. You plant a seed and then you wait. And that principle, though, is a powerful principle. In Galatians, it talks about it. It says, don't be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. You say, what do you mean plant seeds, Alan? Your words are seeds. Your actions are seeds. Listen, some of you have been planting seeds of prayer for lost loved ones or family members or people you care about. Don't stop planting those seeds. Some of you have been planting seeds financially, or maybe you've been giving. You've been doing. Don't stop planting financial seeds. Don't stop planting seeds of goodness, or maybe you're working harder at your job than anybody else and no one notices. If you don't give up, God is not mocked. You will reap a harvest. You just keep on planting seeds. You just keep on hanging in there going, I got good seeds in the ground. There's a harvest coming. It may not come as soon as you'd like for it to come, but it's coming. God has told the truth. His principles are true. You just buy into seed time and harvest. Here's the last one. As we close, as we think about this, listen, you need to keep encouraged by expecting something good to happen in your life. So we mean something, Alan, that's hype. That's not hype, that's Bible hope. Hope is a positive, favorable expectation. You're expecting something good. We got a good God. He does big things. We're expecting something good to happen. We're an expectant people. One of my favorite Psalms is Psalms 27:13. It says, I would have lost heart. I would have lost just encouragement. I would have given up unless I believed I'm going to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I'm going to see God's goodness. And so if you believe that, by believing the right things, you're expecting the right things. And you're believing for God to get involved. And there's one more thing that keeps you encouraged. They teach it to Navy SEALs. They teach it to the military. They call it optimistic self-talk. Optimistic self-talk. Now, it's interesting. In other words, how you talk to yourself. I don't talk to you. I don't talk to myself. You need to. They found that people who talk to themselves like optimists. Optimists think that bad times will not last forever. They're temporary. Optimists think like if something bad happens, it's not because they're horrible. Maybe some things happen beyond their circumstances. Not that I'm so bad. It's other things. That's optimistic thinking. And so optimistic self-talk will help. I've got something one better than optimistic self-talk. It's life-giving God talk. What do you mean by that, Alan? Life-giving God talk is where you take God's words and you talk that to yourself. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. If God is for me, who can be against me? I can boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? Greater is he that's in me than he that's in the world. Yet I'm more than a conqueror through him that loved me. What am I doing? I'm taking God's words and I'm starting to put them in my mouth. That's optimistic God talk. What's that do? It helps you stay encouraged. So as you begin to talk to yourself, as you begin to keep hope alive, what are you doing? You're increasing your grit quotient, your ability to keep in there, to hang in there, to not quit. I believe we need the sense of the old mule. I realize things get tough. I realize things get painful. I wish I could tell you, man, I'm going to pray for you and all the painful, difficult situations are going to leave. That's not going to happen. There was a man who came one time to his pastor. He said, Pastor, I want you to pray that I'd never have any more problems with the devil. He said, you really want me to pray that? He said, yes. Pastor reached out, laid his hand on his shoulder. He said, Father, kill this man in Jesus' name. He said, whoa, I don't want to die. He said, son, until you get to heaven, we're going to live in a world that's fallen, and we're going to have challenges. But thank God we're not facing it alone. And we can do what the old mule did. Farmer in Kentucky had an old mule. Mule got blind. He didn't have the heart to put it down. It'd been a good mule. And so the old mule kind of wandered around the farm. And one day in wandering, he fell in an abandoned well. Well, he hit the bottom of that well. He's braying and making all kinds of noise. And the farmer had an idea. He said, I got an idea. He said, I'll take care of two things at one time. I'll fill this well in. It's abandoned. We need to fill it up. And I'll just bury the mule in it, bury him alive. And so he got his sons together and they began to take dirt. They brought some dirt in and began to dump dirt on the mule. Well, the mule felt that dirt hit his back. And boy, he really freaked out. He started braying and jumping and moving, but he noticed that when he did all that jumping and moving around, that the dirt fell off of him and fell on the ground, and he stepped on it and he stepped up. And so they would dump dirt on him, and every time the dirt would land on this mule, he'd shake it off and step up. More dirt, shake it off, and step up. He kept shaking it off and stepping up until a few hours later, he stepped out over that now failed abandoned well and wandered off on the farm. Listen, guys, if an old mule can do that, we're smarter than an old mule. Life may try to bury you. Life may try to harm you. But by the grace of God, when harmful times hit, we can shake it off and keep stepping up and shake it off and keep stepping up. And through the pain and through the difficulty and through the difficult times and the delays, we can stay in there. And by the grace of God, we'll come through.